Testing.
Test.
Check 1, 2.
1, 2.
Testing.
All right, it is 6:47 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, on to item 2, roll call. Mr. Kirschner.
Here.
Sorry, 1 second. Mrs. Dottelberger.
Here.
Mr. Bauer here. Mrs. Gray.
Here.
And Mrs. Walsh.
Here.
All right, all are present and accounted for. On to item 3, Treasurer Pro Tem. It is recommended to accept Mrs. Dowdelberger as Treasurer Pro Tem for this board meeting.
So moved. Or second.
Yeah, I make the motion
Oh,
to.
okay.
Yep. So you'll second.
Mhm.
Motion by me. All right. So I have motion by myself, Mr. Bauer, seconded by Mrs. Gray. Any discussion?
Is it off subject, but because of the timeliness of it, is it possible to turn the closed captioning on our live feed? Is it usually not on?
You said the live captioning is not working?
On our live feed, there's no captioning.
Oh, okay.
And are we recording the meeting?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you.
Or is it just, like, it says unavailable. I didn't know if it was turned off.
Well, I think if you put forward, nothing might there.
As long as it's on for the public, it doesn't matter. I don't need to watch it here, obviously. I just thought it was off because it was saying it was unavailable.
Not entirely sure to be honest with you, but I'll look into that.
Yeah, it's showing it. Thank you. You're good.
It's working.
Yes.
Any other discussion? All right. Hearing none, on to roll call. Mr. Kirschner,
Aye.
Mrs. Dowdelberger,
Unfortunately, I joke. Yes, I.
Mr. Bauer, aye. Mrs. Gray.
Aye.
And Mrs. Walsh.
Aye.
All right. Motion passes.
So I ask just you guys go bear with me if we do have a lot of discussion, just go a little slower. I don't do this all the time, so if I need you to repeat something or slow down, just bear with me so I can make sure I capture your information appropriately to get to the treasurer so we can vote on the meeting minutes. Thank you.
I have one other item. If you don't mind, I'll just insert it here. We continue to have our board docs agenda immediately after the meeting, reflecting all the notes that the treasurer's putting in. So it's becoming becoming a de facto meeting minutes that's not approved. So people might see things that they think Latoya said, but she didn't, or I said, but I didn't, because he's taking notes and they're going live under our meeting minutes. So if you go to our meeting minutes directly after a meeting, it's going to, our meeting agenda directly after our meeting, it looks like minutes. And sometimes that gets us in trouble because it might not be 100% accurate and the community's seeing it right off before we approve it.
I don't think we can have this.
Yeah.
We have to have an agenda for
Yeah.
one.
We need to move on to adoption of meeting agenda.
Yep.
Okay. On to item B, adoption of meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right.
Let's
Mrs.
go
Gray
ahead.
is
Couple
first.
questions. Oh, are
Mr. Kirschner as second.
Are you ready?
Sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay, so, I mean, I just got this today, by the way, but, during the meeting, first off, there's two, this that was sitting here when I got here has two that are first reads. I don't know, we never had, these weren't attached to our last meeting, to the first read from the last meeting. JFCK and IGBLA. And then-
IGBLA was.
Nope.
That was the first
Can,
one.
can we, can
was
you,
it?
Yep.
1 second, I'm so sorry, can you repeat what your concern was, Ms. Walstrock, and had it added to the meeting minutes? You said there were 2 policies
I
that
didn't bring my book.
are in the packet that are first read. Can you list those again, please?
She mentioned IGBLA and JFCK.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, and Libby just pointed out that the one was there, IBGLA, but JFK was not.
Correct.
That's correct. Yeah, IGBLA was the one I believe you brought up last meeting that has the end of July. The other one also has an end of July date as well.
July 1st.
July, yeah, sorry, end of June, July
But
1st
we
date.
haven't had a first read. Are we required to have a first read? I've not seen this, so I haven't read it at all.
Well, we can discuss this when we get to the board agenda or to the board policy review. Are you talking about JFCK?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't think the caption captured everything that you said. Could
Okay,
you say it
sure.
again, please? Thank you.
So I was just going to say we can, when we get to discussion on board policy review, I think we can discuss that for item JFCK and then also IGBLA.
All right, and so those are the only 2 policies that we'll be doing a second read on, or the one will be a first read, right? Because when you look at the agenda, when I came in here, I looked at the agenda on board docs and it has all the policies attached to it.
Right.
So are you saying we're voting on all of them?
No.
At the last meeting, we said that we were only going to look at the ones that were required to be approved by July 1st.
So the file attachment to the agenda has all of them, so can we correct that and just take the file attachment off? Say that we're doing the first read. And we're doing the second read on the LGBLA,
IGBLA.
and thank you, IGL, that's the promotion of the parent involvement. And are we required, again, I'm gonna ask again, are we required to do a first read? I thought we were, but
Yeah, I think we are.
I can look here real quick.
All right.
Policies. Policy implementation. Superintendent is responsible for carrying out. No, that's not it.
Is there a reason, Kathy, you would not want a first read today? Kathy, is there a reason you would not want a first read today?
I would want to do a first read today, no, but what we're asking now, according to this, is to do a first and approve the policy. That's
So
what the
you're seeking,
agenda says.
so you're seeking clarification. She's seeking clarification on whether or not we need to have a first read, and Libby's looking at that right now.
Thank you.
I mean, we've always done that, so I always figured that it was just a law, that it was a rule that we had to do that. We always do that. And I'm also concerned, like I would want to do a first read and not approve it because the superintendent is not here to answer any questions about the policies. So to approve a policy without being able to ask him questions on if it's best for the district is concerning to me.
Policies introduced and recommended to the board should not be adopted until a subsequent meeting in order to permit further study and provide opportunity for interested parties to react. However, the board may adopt policies at the first meeting they are presented to address emergency conditions or special events.
And which policy are you reading, Libby?
That's policy B, B as in boy, F as in Frank.
So we'll need to then. Oops, I'm not on there. We'll need to then hold another special meeting before the end of July.
No, before the end of June.
Sorry, end of June. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. Before the end of June, then for this policy. So we can do so. Kathy, what you're saying then is this the first read of JFCK, second read of IGBLA.
Yeah, so what I would say is that we modify the agenda to read that, the adoption, well, let me see. Subject to board policy, second reading, take off the file attachment, that's not what we're doing. And call out the policy, well, help me out, Libby.
IGBLA.
Yes, that one. Promoting parental involvement,
Mhm.
and that we add number subject 3, board policy review, first read for the JFCK, use of electronic communication equipment by students.
All right. You're
It's
gonna, sorry, you're gonna need to restate that 1 second.
So you asked to modify the agenda to remove all the attachments minus the IGBLA one, correct?
Mhm, Yes.
I just want to make sure I get this in chunks. Confirming with you, Ms. Walsh.
Can you confirm that?
Yes, number 2 would be changed to that,
Yes, so we're going to modify
and then we would
remove
add a number
all
3.
attachments except for IGBLA and then mark JFCK as a first read, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
All right,
Correct.
thank
and
you.
And that would end up being item number 3 under board items.
Good catch, Kathy. Thank you.
When you're ready, do you mind just rereading the motion that's out? Oh, we need a second.
Oh,
So the motion would be to accept the agenda with the added changes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, you ready?
For
good.
roll call, or you want me to reread? I just
Can you
add-
just reread it one more
So
time?
the agenda now will be as follows, that, under item C, item C2 will be the second read and vote for, IGBLA. And then item C3 will be a first read for JFCK, removing the remaining policies since we identified, now that those are not due, by the July 1st deadline. So that is what we've concurred with. So we have item C2 now to mark IGBLA as a second read. And then item C3 will now be the first read for JFCK. All right, thank you.
Okay.
If we get, you guys ready for roll call?
Roll call, please.
All right, Mr. Kirschner?
Just to clarify, we are amending the original motion and we don't need a second to do that, correct?
We're just we're removing the agenda. So my understanding was that we remove things all the time. So that's what
Okay.
we've done in the past. But if I cannot confirm or deny right now without doing.
I know after we adopt it, then it takes us 2/3 majority. I don't know what it takes prior to adoption, so just clarifying, that's what we're doing.
No, I don't. No, I'm confused. I don't understand what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Okay, so if we had adopted the agenda and then we wanted to change it, that requires 4 out of 5 of us to do that. I don't know what happens. I always thought there was a motion and a second, but that doesn't
We-
mean it's right.
Yeah,
So if
we
you-
didn't adopt. We did not. We just adopted the agenda. Then we would make discussions to pull things out. So she has to pull out
Right.
the attachments, And then we just moved one item down that was already a part of the attachments and just renamed it first read. So I don't know if that requires, because those items were already there. It just separates them into a separate bucket, still under the same agenda item being C for board items. So I could definitely
Well,
look it up. I would just need a few minutes
Yeah, I
to
just
answer
wanted-
that appropriately. But from what I understand, since those items were already there, it's not truly like adding anything. It's just redefining or putting it in a different bucket. That's the best way I can explain it. But if I'm wrong, I don't know.
So was your concern, Mr. Kirschner, that we're changing a special meeting agenda?
No, my concern was whether or not we needed a second. It looks like generally, an agenda can be modified, by majority vote prior to adoption. So I think what she's saying is correct. As far as this being a special meeting, I don't think we're not adding anything to it, so I'm comfortable with it.
Correct. Within the confines, it's the same information. We just reappropriated it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so back to roll call, please.
Mr. Kirschner,
Aye.
Mr. Bauer,
Aye.
Ms. Gray,
Aye.
Ms. Walsh,
Aye.
Ms. Alderberger, aye.
All right, motion passes.
Yes, and I just confirmed it.
Oh.
In Ohio, it is allowed.
All right.
Thank you, Libby.
Okay, on to on to our meeting. Item C, board items, boardmanship training. I'd like to welcome Mrs. Christine Robbins. She's going to be providing our boardmanship training for this evening. Mrs. Robbins is from the Ohio School Boards Association. Thank you for coming tonight.
I don't think, is she on? Because I don't hear her in the speaker. Is there a button for you to push? Okay, speak again.
All right, can you hear me now better? All right, very good. All right, so thank you again for having me here on behalf of the Ohio School Boards Association. It's good to take time for professional development. For some of you, it may be a refresher. For others, might be some new information, but it's a chance to level set. You've completed a school year. As you begin to prepare for the next school year, it's a chance to kind of level set and to talk about governance and to also talk about roles and responsibilities. And we'll be talking a lot about high functioning teams. So before we get started, I did pass out, I think everybody got a copy of a packet that has the slides. So you'll have those to review. My style is very informal. So as we go along, it would be better if this is more of a discussion. And if you ask questions along the way, if I don't know the answer, I will get the answer for you. But I wanted to start with introductions. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and tell me how long you've been on the Board of Education and what's your why? Why did you choose to run for the Board of Education here in Groveport? So who'd like to start?
All right, I'll start. Seth Bauer. I've been on the board for 3.5 years now. And the reason why I ran for the board, so I have kids in the district, but I actually got involved through some of our parent committees early on when we were looking at possibly building new facilities for our schools. And one thing led to another, and I saw some of the needs within the district and wanted to help out and support the kids and the teachers in the district. So that's why I ran.
Okay, thank you.
Libby Gray. This is my 12th year. Originally, I decided to run for school board I have accounting and finance background, and our district was borrowing from future tax dollars, and we were only having around $45,000 in our bank account at any given time. So that was my main goal, was to make sure that we got ourselves financially in better condition.
Okay, thank you, Libby.
So I'll go next. I'm in my 5.5 year mark with a long break in between. I was on the board back in the early 2000s. I got on after observing different building attempts that I wasn't fond of, and really that was, I think, my most driving first factor was to see if we couldn't get building plans that I thought would make more sense, and also wanted to see what we could do about student safety and outcomes. So basically, I kind of committed to never doing this again, but I was really going to be upset if we ended up with a mega 1,500 student middle school on no Bixby. So that really drove me to not want to set it out anymore.
All right, thank you. Okay, Latoya or Kathy?
Yeah, I'm Kathy Walsh. I have been on the board. This is my fifth year actually. I ran because I also did not like having a school in No Bixby Road area. I really wanted to see more community schools. Our communities in some of our areas, the students need more available to them. And I thought we could work with Parks and Rec. Um, and I also was not happy with outcomes. I have several family members who are attending, nephews, great nephews, nieces, and there's just a lot of safety concerns that they are experiencing, and kids going in same families going to different schools when they're the same age, and that kind of stuff just wasn't something I thought was good. So just trying to make some change, make it better for the students. It's all about the students.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Latoya?
Oops, I just need a second so I
Okay,
can finish captioning.
sure.
Thank you, ma'am. Um, my name is Latoya Dadelberger. I've been on the board. This is my well, fifth, fifth year, but fifth year because I was brought in on the 2020 as the appointed and then ran. I want to get involved with the schools, one with the safety, and I have children in the district and the kids in my neighborhood, and definitely two sons with special needs and gifted and talented. So looking at that and wanted to be a part of helping the district get where we need to be academically, as well as safety concerns, and of course newer buildings, with some of our buildings being pretty outdated. My girls attend the school that is about 100 plus years old
Mm-hmm.
at this point. So wanting to be a part of that change and to see how it can support further the teachers on a larger scale, just from outside of just the parent level.
Okay, thank you. Well, I served on the Westerville Board of Education for 2 terms, so 8 years. So I too have been in your seat. I chose to run for the Board of Education in Westerville. I grew up there. Westerville has always been 52 square miles. A lot of people don't realize that. They think Westerville Schools is Westerville proper. When my father moved us there, there were maybe 15,000 people in the community, and today there are almost 15,000 students in the school district. So it's certainly become more and more populated. Saw a lot of change in the school district. At the time, I was the executive director of Leadership Westerville, and I would hear a lot in the community that, the board was not being transparent, the board was not communicating, the community didn't know what was going on, levies were constantly being put on the ballot. So I thought I could bring a historical perspective as well as my involvement in the community to the board. And what I quickly learned, I'm sure as some of you have or are, is that a school district is much more complex than simply stepping onto the Board of Education and making change. There's so much that needs to be addressed related to legal issues, to policy, and just funding the way a school district works. So, but I did learn quite a bit and went through the process of working harder to be a good board member, working harder to be a member of a team. That doesn't mean we always agree, but recognizing that we are indeed a team and we needed to figure out a way to work with one another for the benefit of the students, as Kathy said. So I'm going to skip over this little activity just to in the interest of time. But just for tonight, if you'd be willing to just be present, to participate, to share airspace, respect and value differences that you have, differences of opinion, I believe that makes us stronger if handled in a respectful fashion. Be open minded, share your knowledge and your experiences, and listen to understand. So, as we look at the role of governance, we are looking at a 30,000-foot view. Governance is different than day-to-day operations of a district, and oftentimes the public misinterprets the role of the Board of Education. I had people come up to me immediately after I won and wanted me to change their daughter's bus stop. Not my job. I could look into it, certainly, and I could make the connections. But, again, a lot of people think because you sit on the board, you have an office in the district, you're paid a six-figure salary, you have the ability to make changes on a day-to-day basis. But essentially, the role of the board is to stay at that governance level, stay at the governance mindset. So, primary role governance, just as a reminder, dealing with a system of policies and regulations and ethical guidelines, practices that are used to hold the board and the administration accountable, again, for the benefit of all district stakeholders. So the parents, the students, community members, people who have had children go through the school, alumni, and so forth. So it's important to know that according to the Ohio Revised Code, you have essentially 5 duties. The first is to employ and evaluate a superintendent. The second is to employ and evaluate a treasurer, then to approve the annual budget and appropriations, provide needed, safe, and appropriate facilities, and provide necessary finances for the district's operation. That's it. That's according to the Ohio Revised Code. And so that can help you stay grounded in terms of whether or not you're kind of wading into territory that may be the responsibility of the superintendent and the treasurer. So as we look at your role as a board member, you are policymakers. So you are responsible for ensuring that your policies are up to date. You are looking at that a little bit this evening, have that discussion. That is a key function of the Board of Education. And when I joined the board, I first met with the superintendent and said, I really want to be a good board member. So what can I do? And he gave me 2 pieces of advice. The first was to ask a lot of questions. There's always another side to the story. Sometimes there's 3 sides to the story. Ask questions before you make assumptions. And the second piece of advice was look at the policy. So if you have a question, someone approaches you in the community, go to your policy manual and look to see what the policy says. Now, policies are meant to be changed, certainly, with the majority of the board supporting that and hopefully the support of your superintendent and treasurer. But go to policy and that will help you in terms of answering questions. We mentioned hiring and evaluation of the superintendent and treasurer. So you have 2 employees. That was another misinterpretation. When I first became a member of the board, I had people come to me and want coaches to be fired, teachers to be fired, and thought that I had the authority to do that, and I do not. I am responsible for 2 employees, the superintendent and the treasurer, as an entity. The board is an entity, not me as an individual. And so therefore, their responsibility is for following hiring practices and guidances according to policy when they hire the teachers and the staff. And that's their responsibility. You also serve as key communicators, so communicating with the public, communicating in your community with one another, and making sure that you're being clear and concise in your communications. And you serve as chief advisors, and that's advisors to the superintendent, to the treasurer on community attitudes. So imagine most of you, if not all of you, have full-time employment or other things that you do on a day-to-day basis. This is not your full-time job, but you're out in the community, and so you hear things in terms of what's going on in the community, questions that people have. So it's important for you to be able to share that back with the superintendent and the treasurer. So when we talk about governance-oriented questions, this also helped me as we were going through the process of board meetings. I also did not want to come across as if we weren't having discussions, because it's an important reminder that your board meeting is the meeting of the board in public. It's not a public meeting. Public's welcome to come here. We know all about the Sunshine Law. We know all about the Open Meetings Act, but you are actually having a meeting as required of the board in public, and that's where you deliberate and you debate and you make decisions related to items on the agenda. So what helped me is, as we were making decisions and as things were being brought to our attention, some of these questions that I have listed. Is the decision one that supports our vision, mission, and values? Do you have a strategic plan that's current? So if you do, then is the decision that's about to be made, does it align with your strategic plan and your goals? Does it make sense for the most students possible? Does it make good, strong financial sense? Will your community support the decision? Do you have the resources to make the decision pay off? And have you done the due diligence? So those are the type of governance oriented questions that, as a board of education, you are responsible for asking yourself and asking one another before making decisions. So again, one of the things that, I went to the board meetings and I observed the board, and I had heard different things about how the board wasn't transparent or didn't respect the community. And I wanted to see that for myself. I wanted to see if that truly was the case. And what I found is that it was pretty much, there were times where things were not discussed in public. And there are certainly times when you're going to go just move forward and vote. You're adopting the agenda, right? So unless there's any issue with the agenda, you're going to vote. You're not going to have a big debate or discussion. But there are other times when there are key issues like putting a levy on the ballot, or other key redistricting. In our school district, we had a lot of conversation around realignment and redistricting, that you need to demonstrate as a board member that you're having these conversations with one another publicly. And we'll talk about having disagreements in a respectful, healthy way. That's okay. But you're demonstrating that you're doing your due diligence. And other questions that you may want to ask as you're moving toward making a decision, things about timeline. What are the other options? Certainly, we would ask our superintendent to bring us options and to recommend one that he felt with his leadership team and with the treasurer was in the best interest of the district. But we would also consider, make sure that we let people know that we were considering other options. Levy, for example. Another story I would share is when I first joined the board, I was elected that night in November of 2005, and our levy went down in flames. So it was, congratulations, you're on the Board of Education. You've got a real financial situation you're going to have to be dealing with. So when we began to meet about what are we going to do next? Are we going to put another levy on the ballot? What type of levy? What makes most sense? I wanted to explore a combination income tax and property tax levy. And a fellow board member of mine shut me down in public, said, we've already looked at that. And I had to, very respectfully say, not while I was on the board. So if it's something that I would like to look at, I think that we should bring all options forward. You may better understand it than I do, but I have the opportunity now that I'm on the board to ask for those types of things to be considered and to have those discussions with the other board members, with the superintendent, with the treasurer. So Things like, have you thought about other decisions that you need to make? You might make one decision and then it may lead to some unintended consequences. So you really need to think that through. And then costs, sometimes in terms of time, money, morale, of just not doing anything. So these are the types of things that you need to think about as you're making decisions. Any comments or questions so far? Probably not new information, but maybe a good reminder that this is where you need to reside as a board at that 30,000 foot level. We also broke down in 4 major areas: responsibilities of the board and responsibilities of the superintendent and or treasurer. So when it comes to curriculum and instruction, while you may have, many boards have former teachers that serve on the board that retired, decided they wanted to still be involved in education, and so maybe they have a vested interest or a special interest in curriculum and instruction, and that's great, and their expertise can be used. But as a board of education, the responsibilities are listed here are things like you're responsible for establishing an educational vision. Now, certainly along with the superintendent and the superintendent's team, you're also responsible for adopting or changing programs as necessary, again, as recommended by the superintendent, who is the educational expert and who is your CEO. Review achievement data, discuss messaging to the community, and then ask for and use a lot of data in your key decision making. On the flip side, when you look at the superintendent's responsibility, the superintendent is going to be advising you as the educational expert on the needs of the students, on the needs of the staff. I'm going to be providing leadership and support to you to help improve the way that the staff works with one another, or make other improvements for the community, for the students of the community in terms of student achievement. The superintendent is going to report to the community on the status of education within the district, assign all staff. So it's his responsibility or her responsibility to assign all staff to instructional requirements, and then recommend and implement student assessments to the board. So does anything surprise you when you look at those differences in responsibilities? So if we move to human resources, then you have, again, kind of quickly look through this list that you employ staff based on the recommendation of the superintendent. So the superintendent's going to bring forward oftentimes a cassette agenda that includes personnel items, and whether it's someone who is being promoted or resigned or retired or terminated, that comes forward for your approval. You would also be responsible for adopting policies. So sometimes, again, in smaller communities in particular, board members want to get involved in the hiring of coaches or the hiring of teachers, and that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to make sure policies are in place for human resource management, to make sure that there's hiring practices that make sense. And then we mentioned earlier the evaluation of the superintendent and the treasurer. There's nothing specifically prescribed in the law in terms of how you go about that process. There are some standards that we'll review that I'm sure you're familiar with. But the law basically says, or does say, that you are required to do it on an annual basis, so once a year, whatever that looks like for you, and that's a system you can create if you don't already have one. So then on the flip side, the superintendent's going to recommend employment, as we talked about, or transfers or promotions or dismissal. The superintendent's responsible for effective management and supervision practices for all staff within the district, serves as the board's liaison with staff, notifies staff of board action. We used to do a board report immediately after board meetings. We had a communications person who typically came to board meetings and would do kind of a high level board report, so that information got to staff before they read about it in the newspaper, or read about it online, I should say. And then develops the board with the board of staff and staff a systematic plan for evaluation. So again, that's typically in policy. And when it comes to budget and finance, as a board, it's your responsibility to establish priorities for fiscal management of the district. So that's a key responsibility, again, along with the superintendent and the treasurer. You're going to be approving and adopting and monitoring an annual budget. I don't know if you get budget reports on a monthly basis, but that's typically what's done. making sure that you are providing leadership and securing support for resources. So if there's a levy on the ballot, you know, whether you agreed or not that that levy should be put on the ballot, once that decision's made, supporting the majority and the will of the board is a responsibility of individual board members. And then reviewing annual audit reports, making sure that if there are any adjustments that need to be made, that you know what those are and direct the superintendent or treasurer to do that. So then you can kind of quickly read through the super or the treasurer's responsibilities. And while the superintendent is the CEO, the treasurer is the CFO. So you have someone who is an expert in school finance, and that's, as we said, very complex. They're going to provide you with updates. They're going to prepare detailed budgets. They're going to act as a financial and legislative resource to the Board of Education. And then finally, we looked at collective bargaining, you know, differences between the Board of Education's roles and responsibility and the superintendent's responsibilities. So the board officially recognizes the bargaining units, helps to determine district priorities when it comes to bargaining, establishing guidelines for negotiation, selecting the negotiator, whether you use an attorney or however you choose to handle that, and approve all contracts. So some boards, you know, very, very small towns, they may have a really good relationship with their association, and they're able to sit down, you know, one or two board members with the superintendent and work through a contract. It's really just depends on the type of district that you're in. In a larger district like Westerville, your district, I would imagine you would want to have somebody who is very well educated in collective bargaining. That's a whole art and science to itself. And oftentimes the board is used not at the negotiating table, but again at that high level to be able to be referred to and to help guide the superintendent. Yeah, it depends on what your preference is. I mean, that
Don't
you
forget
sat
to
at
turn
the
on your
table.
mic, Miss Gray. Yeah, no problem.
Yes, and we had two about the whether she recommended the board members be a part of the negotiating team.
So
this was the first year that we've done that. We had it on both
two board
unions.
members. Okay. Yeah. And it just, again, when I was on the board in Westerville, we wanted to try something new called interest-based bargaining. And we had board members sitting at the table. It was a longer process, but the intent was to put issues out and to define interests. And we're not sure that it necessarily worked as well as we thought it might, and so kind of moved back to the board was not at the table. But you know, certainly the board was kept aware by the superintendent and by the labor attorney of what was going on and had input in the final decision. So, okay. All right, so board leadership roles. Again, important to remember that you have no individual authority. You just don't. The board is an entity. It's a body of 5. So when someone approaches you in the grocery store or someone comes and sits with you when you're trying to watch your kid play basketball and asks you to tell the coach to give their kid more playing time, that's not you know, agreeing to do something like that. You do not have the authority to agree to do that. What you can do is you can agree to bring it forward, or you can talk to the individual and say, have you spoken to the coach? Has your son spoken to the coach? Have you talked to the athletic director? Have you talked to the principal? And the chain of command is what I'm getting at here, so that you refer and connect people to the right folks, if that makes sense. So the authority is granted to the board, not individual school board members. You do have a board president who serves in a facilitation role. So your vote, or the weight of your vote, Seth, is no more than the weight of the other members' votes, but you have agreed to take a leadership role and to facilitate the meetings. And in some cases, the board president and sometimes the vice president will meet with the superintendent and the treasurer. In our case, that's what we did in planning for the board meetings. But while communicating with the other board members, making sure that everybody was in the loop. So it's important to make sure that you entrust the day-to-day operations to the superintendent and the treasurer. We also mentioned that it's important to respect the will of the board. That can be tough if you disagree and you have some lively debates. Ultimately, the time to share these lively debates is at the board meeting and during your discussion time. Once the will of the board, you go through the process and the will of the board has been established, then it's done and it's time to move on and to support the will of the board in the decisions that have been made. And that's being respectful of the process that's been established and laid out there. You have an opportunity again to try to persuade the board to your point of view during the board meetings, but going out and undermining the board decision is not going to leave you with a board that is deemed credible. And it's important for you to have those discussions and to recognize that's not very helpful to the board. And people are watching you. They can determine if you are going to support one another, if you're going to have those healthy debates, and it's going to impact the district ultimately. There's a lot of research that's been done about how the school board and the school board's behavior impacts student achievement. And that's kind of one of those things where you go, what? We're at such a different level, but it's so true. And the way that staff perceive you and the way the students perceive you and the way that you work with one another doesn't mean you can't disagree. That's, again, in a healthy way. But you're ultimately here to serve the greater good, and you have an opportunity to make a decision as a board. Any questions about board leadership roles?
Mr. Kirshner, if you could turn your mic on, please.
Thank you. What's the basis for the idea that we only employ the superintendent and treasurer?
Well, it's in the law as one of the responsibilities of the Board of Education.
I think one of the exceptions that I take to the OSBA is that, and that is that they don't recognize the power of a board. We have the ability to hire administrators as we see fit to support the board. We have the ability to hire a business director as we see fit. There's no law that says a superintendent has to be full-time. I think we have a lot more management power than the OSBA. I haven't seen a lot from the OSBA that teaches us how to make drastic changes in failing districts. I've seen a lot that says go along and get along. And so I don't think I know it's not true that we can only hire the superintendent and treasurer.
The things that are in the code, in the Ohio Revised Code, were the 6 things that I reviewed.
Right.
So you certainly approve other hires that are brought forward by the superintendent. But when it comes to hiring directly, the only 2 that you hire directly participate in the interviewing process, participate in the evaluation process, and who report to you as a board are the superintendent.
So you
treasurer.
didn't know that a business director can report?
There can be business directors, but in the revised code, again, it specifically talks about the superintendent treasurer. Some districts do have business directors.
So
if it
yeah, the
makes
Ohio
sense.
Revised Code tells us that we can have a business director report directly to the board.
If I would have to look for sure. I'm not going to quote the code on the business director piece. I'm familiar with the superintendent and the treasurer.
And in a case, and I have looked into this extensively, there are cases where you have administrators that do not cooperate with boards, right? Or that make it very difficult for a board to do their job. And so in those cases, like maybe you have a hard time getting information, maybe you are stiff-armed and kept at length. I believe if you really research it, you will find that the board, for instance, could assign a secretary to themselves and to the business director and create tools that would help them be better informed when you don't have some of the resources that maybe should be provided to you. So honestly, I think if you really dug in, you will find that we have a little more hiring capabilities than you believe or you're presenting here.
That's not my understanding, but again, what we're trying to focus on is that the board stays at the governance level. If you have issues with other administrators, then certainly you would hold the superintendent or the treasurer accountable for dealing with those
Right,
issues.
right. And then the other thing is, I understand, once a decision is made, um, supporting the decision, but there are also exceptions, and then there's also the idea of our freedom of speech. So in the instance that we think, let's say it's a middle school for 1,500 kids, and I adamantly believe that that harms our students because it's 1,500 middle schoolers in one building, and it will create safety issues and harm. Then for me as an elected official, it would be irresponsible for me to just sit silently while this thing comes to a.
And hear me clearly, I'm not suggesting that you sit silently. The time to debate is when you're having these conversations at a board meeting in public. Once a decision is made, a decision is made. You can say whatever you would like to. It's going to ultimately hurt the board and the credibility of the board to not support the board. It undermines what the board has decided, the majority of the board has decided. But you can certainly say whatever you want to say. Best practice is you debate publicly in this forum.
Yeah.
Passionately share your opinion. Ultimately, when it comes down to a vote, if the vote's 4-1 or 3-1,
Right.
and you're in that one, then or 4-1 or 3-2. If you're in the minority, then that's the decision's been made.
Well, then the other flip side of that is when I was on the board before, the people creating the plan were very practical and very outspoken about the need for unanimous support to pass something.
Yeah.
So I would say the dissension might hurt the board, but it might help the board.
Yeah.
Because if a board goes in knowing that not collaborating and not getting buy-in results in hurting the board, dysfunction of the board, then maybe there is long-term benefit to that, I guess is all I'm saying. So basically I'm saying I think there is a place and a time for dissension beyond the board meeting because the campaign goes beyond the board meeting. And I guess it's just like I don't lay down my rights to campaign against something when I become a board member.
No, that's certainly your prerogative. Certainly your prerogative. Best practice, as we've said, is this is where you have the debate and the discussion and the dissension, and then the decision's made, and that's the decision the board is moving forward with, and the district is. So hope you are understanding what I'm trying to say there is I would never say that you have to vote 5-0 for every single decision that comes through. That's not healthy
Sure.
either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's healthy to be able to bring different perspectives. You're all elected individually. So you're all going to bring different perspectives and share those perspectives openly. It becomes problematic for boards when they don't have that discussion in public and there's rote votes. And so that, people then make the comments like they're not being transparent or they're having conversations not in public. And you have to be very cautious about that because your meeting's in public, and that's why the Open Meetings Act exists. That's why there's sunshine laws, so that the public can hear your perspectives and help you get to understand how you got to the conclusion that you got to. That makes
I'd
sense.
just like to input a little something. Just, I think what John was referring to was section 3319.03, business manager. Is that correct, John?
I couldn't hear anything you said.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I thought you were referring to section 3319.03, business manager, and a business manager can be hired and report directly to
Yes,
the board.
I acknowledge that if you choose to do that.
I just want to make sure I understood what he was.
Yeah, this district does not have a business manager. Is that correct? You have a superintendent and a treasurer.
No, we do not have a business manager.
Is that correct? You have a
Yeah.
business manager
Yeah.
that reports to the board directly?
No.
Okay,
We have
Okay.
never mind.
okay.
Oh, this is
I don't know that he could because he's not licensed or degreed.
So again, it depends upon the district and the district's needs. I am not an attorney, so I'm not going to share anything beyond what I'm familiar with. And we do have a legal hotline that I can share with you if you want some more specifics related to that. I don't want to get you or me in trouble
Right.
in regard to that. So, other questions or comments?
I'd just like to say that when you're talking about once the vote is cast, we have seen that as an issue, and it has hurt the board's credibility.
So maybe that's something you can talk about as a team.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're not trying to limit someone's freedom of speech, certainly, but how, think about ways that how is it hurting? I don't think it's any of your intent to hurt the district. And if something is hurting the district, then you need to have those conversations and figure out a way that you can work together for the benefit of the district and the students. So we want to turn to characteristics of high functioning teams. So we want to start with individuals in terms of your own individual board member characteristics. So based on what OSBA has done through 75 years of being an association and working with hundreds and hundreds of school board members across the state, plus working with national associations and other school board members across the country. If you are able to assess high functioning boards, these are 5 key competencies that we would focus on and have you ask yourself these questions. And the first is competence. So we're talking about experience and knowledge and ability and attitude and behavior. And the question here is for you to ask yourself, as a board member, am I willing and able to understand and abide by district policy? So spend some time getting familiar with policy that's already in place, making sure you're abiding by district policy. Am I willing and able to ask for and use evidence to make decisions and communicate professionally and fairly with members of the public on behalf of the district? So if I were to, we'll go back to this and then we might want to let it rest, but if I were to vote no on something and the majority of the board voted yes, and I was asked why I voted no and what I thought, I could certainly share, these were my thoughts. I brought them to the board. The decision was made to go this direction. That's the direction we're going to move. If you have questions, come to the board meetings, ask the superintendent, listen to the, or look at the board minutes, watch the recordings of the board meetings, and that can help explain where we are. But I, again, made the decision that I pled my case and this is the direction we're going to go. So I'm going to throw myself behind that and help support the board to make things better for the district. So then it comes to collaboration. And so then a question to ask yourself here is, as a board member, am I willing and able to work as a member of the board team and the district leadership team and with committee members when assigned in ways that move the group consensus and decisions in the best interest of the students? That's what I think you can all say that you have in common. You're here for the students. I mean, I heard everyone say that's why I'm doing this. I want what's in the best interest of the district and for the students, all students of the district. So it has to come back to that. So making sure that you're willing to work with others in a way that'll help move the district forward. The third is commitment. So you've all demonstrated you're committed to this community, committed to this district by virtue of the fact you ran or you were appointed to the Board of Education. You're spending hours and hours of your time preparing for board meetings, going out into the community, being visible at district events to the extent you can do that. And are you willing to share representation? What we did in Westerville, there are many of us who were involved in civic groups like, Rotary or the Lions Club or Kiwanis or the Chamber of Commerce. And we just kind of shared those responsibilities to make sure that there was a presence there at these meetings. One of the criticisms that we received was that we were only out and about when there was a levy on the ballot. So, you are always campaigning on behalf of the district. And by campaigning, I'm not talking about necessarily a political campaign, but you're always out there presenting the district in the best light possible. You've moved from 3 stars in your report card to 3.5. That's something to celebrate. And to be able to be out there and communicating that, to the board that you were able to achieve that, or to the community. Cooperation. So as a board member, are you willing and able to work with your board colleagues in discussions that are related to policy and decision making? Are you able to cast votes based on evidence and discussions that you had with the board, and work with your board colleagues in supporting the will of the board? And we've talked about that. And then communication. As a board member, are you willing and able to exchange ideas, information, and your thoughts in a way that's going to help others consider your perspective? Are you willing to respond in a timely manner? Are you willing to listen? I think one of the key skills in terms of communication is to listen to understand. Most people listen with intent to reply. So if you're having a heated discussion, or a lively discussion, I would say, rather than thinking, okay, how am I going to respond to that? I need to really listen to understand, and to try to understand where the other person is coming from, and keep an open mind. And you may change your mind, you may not, but listening is an important component of communication. Keeping confidential conversations. That's something that can be tough and can be challenging. There was a situation where we were in executive session, and there were a couple of staff members in executive session with us. And by the time we were dealing with a personnel situation, by the time I got home, my husband had already heard about the discussion, because someone left the meeting and decided to share that information with someone who shared it with someone else who shared it with somebody else. And I mean, I'm a 5-minute drive away from the Board of Education offices. So that again is going to diminish your credibility as a board. Just make sure you keep information confidential, and you clarify when it is intended to be confidential. So, again, not saying don't express your opinion. What we're talking about is think about these key competencies and how you can improve in a way that you can work with one another respectfully and make decisions in the best interest of the district. Not saying just get along. That's really not the message I'm here to send. I want you to think about a team. We're going to talk a little bit about teams, and I'm trying to be sensitive to your time too, so I will keep moving along here. So we know it when we see it. When you're on a great team, you know what that's like. When you're on a team that's not working, you can figure that out too pretty quickly. So if you think about the best team you've ever been on, it doesn't have to be, professional. Maybe it was an athletic team. Maybe it was some other type of team in another organization. Think about what are the characteristics that made that team the best team. Can you think about that, or share ideas related to characteristics of the best team you've ever served on?
Cooperation.
Cooperation, that's something we just talked about. What does it mean to cooperate as a member of the Board of Education to you, or to anyone? Listening.
Open-mindedness.
Okay. I changed my opinion multiple times because there was a lot of information that I just simply didn't know when I went into a situation where I thought I'm going to go this direction, and I listened and was able to hear that there were some things that didn't make sense to me. So when we're talking about teamwork, it's a choice. So you can choose to come together in productive ways, and that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes courage and discipline and emotional energy as well. So that can sometimes falter, but in order to come together, even driven teams who try to work together as a team can often fall apart, because it does take a lot of effort and hard work to do that. Much of what I'm going to be talking about related to teamwork comes from Patrick Lencioni's book. It's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, written some time ago. I'd rather flip it on a positive, what makes a highly functioning team. But he talks about teamwork being a choice, that I'm going to come to this meeting and I'm going to choose to be part of this team. Again, I may not agree with everything you think or do or say, but I'm going to be part of this team because I am part of this team. that it's a strategic decision, that you need to invest time and maintain focus. And the good news is that even if you are not quite where you want to be, you can always get back on track if you're all willing to do that. Think about, some of the questions that you might ask yourself, and some of them, you may be saying, yeah, we do that, but others you might maybe pause and think about whether or not you need to change your approach. So questions like, do team members openly and readily disclose their opinions? Are you all comfortable with that at board meetings with one another? Are team meetings productive? Are they compelling? Does the team come to decisions quickly and avoid getting bogged down by consensus? Not necessarily a bad thing, but are you able to get a decision made without really getting yourself bogged down? Do you sacrifice your own interests for the good of the team? Again, you're working as a board and as a single entity. And if you are able to do these things and work with one another, it's going to help get results in the end and benefit the students of the district. So Lencioni offers this pyramid. I'm not sure what happened. This has to do with with the with our issues with technology a little earlier. But at the very foundation of this pyramid concept is trust. So the ability to trust one another. And if there is a lack of trust, trust takes, at times a long time to build, but you can lose it in an instant. And it's really hard to get it back unless you're absolutely willing to just say, okay, I'm gonna try this again. But when there is a lack of trust, typically you would experience people would be reluctant to be vulnerable with one another. And what I'm talking about is being willing to admit mistakes or to acknowledge weaknesses or to say, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole and pretend that I am. But, being willing to be vulnerable with one another. And what trust looks like, and you can jump in terms of what it looks like to you. But to me, it's where I feel valued, I feel respected, I feel like I'm listened to. Even if someone doesn't agree with me, they took the time to listen and to understand I don't feel marginalized. And, again, I'm able to say, well, I was wrong, or I'm thinking a little bit differently based on our conversation. So, you have to be able to trust one another fundamentally and be comfortable with being vulnerable with one another and open with one another and being able to have those conversations in public in a comfortable way, in a professional way. So then if you don't have a solid foundation of trust, it's difficult to then get to the next level. But again, one of my favorite quotes here from Ernest Hemingway is, the best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them. We all approach trust differently. I think, my tendency is I'm going to trust you until there's a reason for me not to. Other people, based on their experiences, it's really based on your life experience and situations you've dealt with. You may say you need to prove yourself to me before I can trust you. But think about ways that you can work with one another, to build trust with one another, to show respect. And that's going to filter down into the district. People see you behaving in a way that you're able to trust one another and work with one another, then you're role modeling that for the district and for staff and for students as well. If it's difficult to deal with conflict in a healthy way if you don't have trust. So we're talking about healthy conflict here. And that's where you're able to share, your perspective. We were in a session this morning, a leadership development session that dealt with conflict modes, styles of conflict, and when is appropriate to use the different styles of conflict. And ultimately, the question was, when you think of the word conflict, what comes to mind? If I put that word out there, what do you think about?
Those that are for and those that are against.
So some that are for, some that are against, that's kind of winners, some kind of losers kind of thing. Ultimately, conflict's an opportunity. And I learned years ago, this was one of the pieces of advice that I've taken with me for many, many years, was if you approach conflict with curiosity, that goes a long way toward resolving the conflict. Instead of just, no, you're wrong. This is my way or the highway. Help me understand why you think the way you think. Help me understand your point of view. So you want diverse opinions, you want diverse perspectives, and ultimately you can come up with better solutions that way. There are 5 conflict management styles if you're interested in further professional development. And I'm sure, Latoya, with your experience in the HR world, you know about these instruments, but it was helpful for us to go through a process of figuring out how we all dealt with conflict. What was my dominating style or my natural style compared to others? And then there are ways that you can work with other people. Knowing that somebody is highly assertive and low in terms of cooperativeness, there are ways for me to be able to reach that person in order to deal with conflict. So focus on issues. It's not personal. Sometimes that's hard. I have trouble with that because I think, I'm pouring my heart out for this community. I'm taking time away from my family. I grew up here. I want the school district to be successful. So at times, things that were said in public or to me by other board members felt personal, but you had to go back and focus on the issues. Focus on the district priorities. I don't know if you have a strategic plan or certain goals in place. That's one way to bring you back to what's important to the board as you're making decisions. Make sure you disagree in a respectful way. I mean, tone of voice, body language, all of that. When I would observe board meetings, when I was deciding whether I would run, I understood that in terms of public participation, the board did not engage. And part of the reason for that was they might not have every piece of information they needed to. And that, people didn't quite understand that. How they did engage, however, was with eye rolling, with body language, with huffing and puffing. And that was just a bad look for the board. So making sure that you're listening to other people in a way that it can be received as respectful. And then when decisions are made, I mean, this kind of goes back to leave it at the table, and it may come back around at some point, but you make a decision, you disagree respectfully, leave it at the table. Oftentimes boards develop ground rules or norms. You have a code. Do you have a code of civility or something in your?
We have board norms.
Because I saw something I was looking at, and I thought I read it was a code of civility in your policies, but maybe I was looking at a different
No,
policy.
it's our board norms, and we do it at every organizational meeting, and the board
Okay.
members have the opportunity to sign it.
Okay, so that's just a way to help. Everybody contributes to that, typically, in terms of developing them and supporting them. And if you can't support, then you need to figure out, what the conflict is and go from there. But it helps to center the board. So like one of our norms was we're not going to be texting each other during a board meeting. I mean, that's just not a good look unless there's some kind of an emergency, and you can always take a timeout or a recess. But, turn your phones off unless you're expecting some type of an emergency call. But those are the kinds of things that oftentimes are helpful in dealing with conflict and how you're going to deal with conflict. Then commitment, healthy conflict ultimately leads to commitment, and that's to move forward with an agreed upon plan, making sure that you support decisions that are made if you are able to do so. But it's important for you to feel that you were heard. And that's a place to start if you're dealing with conflict that's unable to be resolved, is to think about, again, trust. How are we dealing with conflict? Are we understanding one another? Are we listening to understand? But that back and forth is what's going to help everyone feel and believe that their opinions and their ideas have been heard and seriously considered. That's due diligence, making sure that no stone is left unturned. So when you commit to team decisions, just, focus again, trying to link it back to priorities, trying to get buy-in as much as you can. Not, I had a board member that ran, I think it was in my last couple of years, and she ran, she was very clear that she was running to vote no on everything, and even said that during the campaign. And, you may vote no on some things, but voting no on adopting the minutes, unless there's a real solid reason to do that, you're simply being a contrarian. So that's not helpful to the board. But, be clear on what you are attempting to do in order to serve the district. And you may not get buy-in on everything, but think about that. I mean, we expect different behavior from the students and from our staff. This then ultimately leads to accountability and holding one another accountable. So if you do have norms and you're all willing to support those norms, holding one another accountable and the team accountable to those norms, making sure that you're committed to a clear plan of action, that you're focused, that you're driven, that you're trying to make sure that you are not exhibiting behaviors that are going to ultimately hurt the team. It's a choice. You can choose. I can come in upset to a board meeting and choose to act out at the board meeting. How is that helping the board and the district with the board and the district's business and moving forward? And how's that helping the students? So again, it's a choice in terms of what we do in terms of behavior. And then you're focused on results, hopefully. I mean, ultimately what you would like to be able to do. Well, I was going to share this exercise, not that we're going to do it, but in an organization where I worked, we went through this process because our team was struggling, and it wasn't a public body, but it was a team for a university, and it was a really tough time. So we did it. We had a retreat, and we all had to answer these questions or complete these statements to the others around the table. It really helps the team when you, and it really hurts the team when you. So for me, someone said it really helps the team when you ask clarifying questions. You're really good about asking questions. It really hurts the team when you get defensive. And of course I got defensive right away. I'm like, I don't get defensive. But I mean, it's like putting that mirror up and saying, what am I doing to contribute to the success of this team? So figuring out a way to be respectful, I think ultimately is what we're saying here. And then results, you want to make sure that you are reviewing performance data. There's something called an autopsy without blame. So if there's a failure, if, for example, the levy fails, so why did that fail? We're not going to blame anybody. We're going to look at reasons why we believe the levy failed and what the message was, and maybe it was the type of levy, but let's take a look at that and figure out what we need to do differently. And making sure that you are on the same page in terms of district and team goals is very helpful. So what questions or comments do you have related to these? These are supposed to be high functioning teams, or the characteristics of high functioning teams based on research that's been done. Does that make sense to you in your other worlds, as far as working with other people? And it's not always easy, for sure. There's going to be times where you mess up and you say something, and then, and I've done that where I've had to go back to another board member and say, you know what, my tone of voice was really inappropriate. I was sarcastic. I'm sorry. That was not my intent. And I know that had a negative impact on the tone of our meeting. So, give yourself some grace, but ultimately think about the way that you work with one another and trust one another in order to get the work done. So what questions or comments do you have for me?
Mr. Kirshner, if you could turn your mic on, please. Thank you.
I really wish we had our audio video updated by now. I think you've hit on the issues that really are the roots of our problems, and I'll just say, my experience this time around has been drastically different than my first time. And I'm just basing this on trust. I'm not trying to point fingers.
Sure.
When I got here, no invite to orientation. We haven't had any kind of real team building, any kind of annual goal setting together where we really work together, like I've seen before.
Mhm.
Policy governance. We did a lot better job of working together and training together. I'd say 20 years ago than what I see now. So not coming in, not really feeling included, wanting to do policy governance and getting, and I'm just putting it out there, but having one policy committee meeting and then having it basically disbanded because I don't know. For me, from my perspective, we didn't want to do the work, and we wanted to hand the control over to somebody else. So, yeah, I'm not sitting on a foundation of trust or collaboration.
What would help that to change for you?
Um, for me, it's about setting policy and having outcomes. So for me, having meaningful policy committees would be a great start. And having now we've talked about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now getting down into the nuts and bolts of it and how we team build, how we do create collaboration and actually execute.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
Obviously, trust is the biggest issue. How do we overcome that as a board?
I wish I had a magic answer to that. I think, if you have an opportunity to spend a work session together and talk, being open and talk about some of the things that you agree upon, and that could help build trust with one another, that would be helpful. It is, again, one of those things that it's easy to lose and hard to regain at times. For me, there was one particular board member where I just felt that there was not a trusting relationship, and it took me scheduling time with that board member to have a conversation and to say, let's start fresh. And let's figure out a way that we can work with one another to move the district forward. And then, communication and trust go hand in hand. And if you are making a commitment to be trustworthy, then your actions are going to speak louder than your words. So making sure that your actions demonstrate that, you want to regain trust as a board.
I'm going to pile on here too and say our board's never been perfect while we're on it. We had some pretty crazy board members and some pretty crazy division. But even in the midst of that, in the past, there was collaboration on the agendas. There was communication, even if you didn't really particularly care for each other.
Mm-hmm.
Direct more, because from my understanding, the creating of the agenda is an administrative function. If you're not talking about policy. So there was a lot more, or there was really good communication from the board president to the other four members to ensure that month to month their goals and their ideas were being incorporated into the agenda.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that's something that can be improved in terms of how you communicate with one another outside of the board meetings, and you have to be cautious about that. There's a fine line there. You're not canvassing individuals to determine where they stand on positions. But, if I, as a new board member, it was important for me to meet with people individually to try to better understand, things that were coming before us, not to say, here's what I'm thinking in terms of here's how I'm going to vote. It's helped me understand where this came from, help me understand the policy, and just trying to get information from those who have been around and who may have more knowledge than I do on the situation. But it's not impossible. It's not impossible. And when we're in a time where fresh starts are good in the summertime as you head into a new school year. So focusing on things like, the fact that you do want to engage in in healthy conflict, that you do want to be able to commit to decisions once a decision has been made and hold one another accountable and focus on achievement. And, with your mission, I don't know if you include your mission on your agenda or not, but a lot of boards will include their mission, every student, every lesson, every day. If you have a vision, that's included values. You require one another to stand by your values, or you have beliefs, I believe, that are, is this what you're doing? You're believing, all of you should believe that all of you are valuable, and you are. And your perspectives are valuable, and you're there to serve, you're there to support, you're there to inspire, and support the beliefs of the district by your behavior, by your actions, by the way you interact with one another.
Did you?
I was just gonna say, going back to collaboration. I do feel that I have tried to the past 6 months work with all board members. I mean, the boardmanship training that we're doing right now, I believe was your idea, Mr. Kirshner. You had requested this training. I've implemented on our agendas changes that Kathy has brought to my attention as well. So certainly, I think that we're all trying to respect one another. I'm not sure with collaboration, Mr. Kirshner. What else is there other ideas that you had, or?
No, I wasn't, again, I wasn't trying to point fingers at you at all. I'm just saying that my past experience was there was a verbal review of what we're coming up on. So the president would call and talk to me or when I was president, I would talk to the other four and I'd say, here's what we're going through, or here's what's on the agenda. Do you have anything that you want on the agenda? And, and again, this is not me, up shame on you at all, but oh, this is the first read, right? And I never see it again. Like, okay, we agree that you're going to have this is going to be your first read, Mr. Kirshner, and then I don't ever see the item again. So, and that's of course on me as well, because I could certainly push and say, hey, you forgot to put this on. But then when I do that, I feel like if I have to ask for the second read, I'm probably wasting my time, right? I just think it's something we can, I'm just comparing my past experience
Sure.
to this experience. And the past experience, even though we had all kinds of discord before, and I would say lower skill than we have here now. Definitely much lower skill sets than we have here today. The communication on that, and strategic planning meetings and policy governance meetings at high levels, those kind of things just really help. And this is a great thing, and I appreciate it. I'm just saying, next step, would be how, with a strategic planning meeting where we agree together on goals and people see what my goals are versus all the other board members' goals. There's obviously, and that's why we're here, there's obviously a great opportunity to build trust as best we can, collaborate and hear each other more.
Yeah.
I would just say that my time as president as well, with what I had learned, we would send out. I think it's good to hear that you said a verbal review. Didn't know that was what the need was, but I think also with all of us being professionals, kind of the phone conversations are hard, especially during the day. Then family after, plus board commitment. So a lot of things are done, via email or mailed preference per, whatever the board members are looking for. In addition to when we talk about trust, having that the conversations that are had are not shared outside, because if we talk about trust, then it should not ever appear that we can hear it somewhere else, and that something that we could all agree to and sign. I think that would be a really good step. So if it's not those board norms, or just civility between each other and having that as a contract, so we're not, maybe interpreting one person's belief one way or vice versa, and then it's not in a way put out to the community or through community channels as if it's something else, because it just appears that way in all honesty. So I mean, I'm happy to hear about the verbal review. I'm not sure how that can be done or accomplished, but I think there's probably a way. And everyone doesn't text, everyone doesn't do phone,
Mm-hmm.
everyone doesn't use the school district email. So our board does have those challenges as well. Everyone has their own preference of communication or certain members. So then that's also kind of hard when you have full-time job and a family and this portion of your work. And if it's easier to email, still getting the same information out, that is one way, but then that's still not the best preference or best course of action
Mm-hmm.
for maybe board members to feel that they're valued. So
Mhm.
that's fair to say,
Mhm.
or find a happy medium with that. That may be another next step for us. And then when it comes to, I would like to just highlight one win, whether, for me, at least what I see, I think it was brought up at I want to say the end of last year or maybe the end of this year when we had our teaching department where we talked about that moving of our stars. So regardless of what we're doing here as a board, and as much as there may be discord or an appearance of discord or there's just whatever, our team is still moving forward, and our team that we have in place has moved that needle. And even in the presentation with the data that you talked about we should show has been shared, like that's been the best rating in a good 10 plus years.
Mhm.
So that shows a lot of growth and a lot of work in our district that we are moving forward. And I think us really sitting back and say, okay, even despite of this, like
Mhm.
we're not holding hands and singing kumbaya in the sandbox. However, our district state report card says this. Like that's phenomenal, and that is leaps and bounds to where we were when I first got on the board. I believe there was a piece that went out around 2021 that we were failing and there's like F's on our faces and stuff like that. But here we
Mhm.
are today
Mhm.
with a 3.5 in year, from 2020 to 2025. That's a nice movement for a
Yeah.
school district of our size with the challenges and the financial challenges we've
Mhm.
had. So I think that I want to take that opportunity and support the win there, and thank our administration, thank our teachers for the hard work, and the parents even working with their students at home for us to achieve that milestone and to see that growth
Mhm.
over time. And I always go back and look at that board meeting and pull that presentation for myself as a reminder of the why and to show our progression. And I think we talk a lot about what's wrong, but we don't really celebrate the wins
Mhm.
collectively, whether we agree or not. But they're there, and it's the proof is there that we're doing something right. And
Mhm.
I think if we can figure out, okay, how did we get this, and then how we spread that across everything.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
thanks.
Well, and it sounds like just listening to you speak, those of you have said maybe this could be like the next step, and you could do a board self-assessment. We could help you with that. You could set some board goals, whether it's taking another look at the norms. What do you agree on? What can you change so that all of you can agree?
And if I can say one more thing, it's not that we have not had like strategic planning retreats and things. We have done those things.
Mhm.
Hence is where we are academically.
Yeah.
And it wasn't with this particular board, but a portion of this board
Mhm.
where we have had those conversations and gotten where we are.
Right.
And this board does take policy and governance very, very seriously,
Mhm.
where we have had the majority of the board has opted in for it to be a part of the full board's responsibility versus a subcommittee. So that has not been addressed. It's just that the minority, it has not been agreed upon. It was majority concurred with it being, housed in the board how it has been
Mhm.
primarily, and then focus on community, focus on working with the parents, focus on being in the buildings with the students. And that is what the work we have done. And that's where the committees are the additional work that the board has been doing, where the policy has been handled here,
Mhm.
and have that discussion here at the board meeting.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and some boards choose to do that. I think some boards may have a policy committee, but a lot of boards address it as it's like a committee of the whole, so that it's
Right.
all five of the board members, and you stay at that governance level. So, but it's, you know, did you have something, Libby?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I think that it all has to do with trust with our board, but it also has to do with respect and not only respecting one another, but also respecting our administration
Mhm.
and how our words are used during board meetings towards them. And it shows out in the community. I mean, we have students that come to us and tell us,
Hmm.
this is ridiculous.
Hmm.
So um, they
So,
see it.
yeah, level set. I mean, it's an opportunity to kind of step back and say, okay, you know, and if you do, again, you go through, I was going to touch on the superintendent evaluation standards, the treasurer evaluation standards, but that's where everything kind of comes into alignment. If you do have strategic priorities or goals, you have your vision, your mission, but there are standards that were set by the state for the superintendent and the treasurer as well. And that's where, you know, if there are any concerns about performance, that's where they're addressed, and they're not surprises. These are conversations that should take place throughout the course of the year.
And I just want to say another big win is when we worked together and celebrated, well, not celebrate, but did a really good job working together on the treasurer's evaluation.
Good.
The instrument, made the instrument work how we needed to work. And we've got the superintendents coming up. So I
Mhm.
think we've got a good rhythm there.
Good.
Where maybe before it wasn't as tight, but I think this past time it's very, very, very tight. And didn't get much like after we had our final review. I think we were in a good place. At least I haven't heard anything different, but I wanted to point that out. That was another really good win that we had where we did collaborate and work well
Good.
together.
Well, then you can, you know, you can do it. You know, it's just a matter of applying it. The Board of Education standards. So these are some things, and I won't go through all of the individual slides related to them. But if you're interested in doing a self-assessment that might help you set some goals and move you forward in terms of how you work with one another, they focus on responsible school district governance, communication of and commitment to high expectations, creation of district-wide conditions for student and staff success, district accountability in all areas, and engagement of all community members. So when I've worked with boards who have done the self-assessment, and you can see where the gaps are. I mean, you may have some board members that'll say, you know, we rate really high in this one area, and you may have one or two who say, I don't think so. And that opens up the conversation as to, you know, why does there seem to be a gap? And let's figure out a way to fix that, and to set some goals, like we were talking about a little bit earlier. Maybe you do want to have a strategic planning retreat, or you want to do some additional professional development, or you want to set some specific board goals for how you work with one another as a board. And there's some examples in here, and that's something that we'd certainly be able to help you with. But you know, if you're going to evaluate other folks, it's good to evaluate yourself and kind of set that example as well.
And just looking at these, like these are really good, especially the engagement of all community members.
Mhm.
I think we do a really good job. We have our Golden Cruisers Club. So you don't just have to be a parent. There's a way that they connect. We connect with all of our community. At least it seems that way.
Mhm.
So that's another really good win. Of course, we can expand that and do better with other groups in the community. But I think it's very like when I've talked to other school districts, they don't necessarily have those
Yeah.
type of things that we have where they really engage that, and in our alumni and those kind of pieces, which I think that's a really good thing we can celebrate as
Right.
well.
Yeah. Well, and this is kind of how this is a matrix that we've used where it has those board standards, and then you don't have to fill in the whole thing, but set one or two goals. You know, one of the districts I worked with, they did not necessarily kind of spread out and spread the you know, responsibilities among one another to attend different community events and to be visible and to be out there. And so they wanted to create a district event calendar or a community event calendar. And some, you know, naturally, if you have kids in the district or grandkids or whatever, you may be the one that's at the Friday night football games or at the band rehearsals or whatever. But it's a way to say, okay, we just want to be visible out in the community, spreading the good news and the things that we're doing, listening, you know, for concerns that are being expressed, and in order to move the district forward.
And I don't remember if we did this before. We used OSBA, but I don't remember if were you on the board then?
I know we did a board self like an assessment. We did that once, and then we've also done more than one retreat, which is where we
Yeah.
are now with the 5 years. So we're due to kind of I think we're due just in general with our new board member just to kind of go over. But we've done this. We've
Yeah,
also
I couldn't
done
remember if
a
you were on the
strategic
board then.
planning.
Mhm.
We've done except for last year and this year we have not, but the other
Yeah.
years we have.
Yeah.
And we can definitely see the fruit of that. Our communications are better,
Good.
our academics are up, and I think we even had a percentage, even our safety, where we were looking at incidents, we've seen improvement there as well. So those were kind of the top three areas: the
Yeah.
academic, safety, and comms.
Mhm.
And we were definitely on path to being fiscally responsible, but it was just those other three areas. So,
Mhm.
but that's definitely a great metrics to take back. And maybe one as we discussed the agenda, adding those items. I know we have these other one-offs, looking at other presentations, but maybe as we're getting, the next meeting or two, because school starts in August,
Mhm.
ensure we get those things aligned and get that to leadership as we roll into next school
Mhm.
year.
Great.
So one other issue, you talked about communication. One thing that I don't use is use the board computer, and that was basically my request when I came on. I found out there was a survey that was put out that was never released that the taxpayers paid for, but we refused to release it. And the basis for that was some emails between employees that were viewed, and those that whatever was in that was used to say we're not releasing the survey, which is my describing. Okay, so I asked, okay, so we've got people that can go into emails, as far as I know, without board approval or action, and they can just do what they want with them. And I have a computer that I don't really have control of, right? So what are my safeguards? And I never got that answered. So therefore I put an auto response in and said, I'm not using this anymore.
Mhm.
Answer my question. So that
Mhm.
was to me a very early litmus test, right, of trust. And that's still for me unaddressed. So, and that does create communications issues
Sure.
with me because honestly, I observed what I felt was unfair attacks on other board members, and I didn't trust wholeheartedly not to be hurt by administration based on some things that happened early on. So that was just me putting a shield over myself, going, "How do I know I can trust you to do that? My data is protected, communication between me and attorneys are protected, give me some guidelines, give me show me something." And I got pretty much as far as I could see, just the door.
Mhm.
And I never got a response to that. And every time you send me an email, you get basically, I'm asking that same question again. It's like,
Mhm.
I'm not using this email. Here's why.
Mhm.
And I was honestly, that is a real trust issue with me
Mhm.
because I think I've seen other people try to do good things and then have it used against them. And so I have a little bit of distrust there, a lot of distrust there. And I wanted that answered. I wanted to know, when can an IT guy dig? What if what what if a leader doesn't like what I said or what I'm doing or whatever? Where's my protection? What are
Mhm.
the guidelines? When can they engage? Obviously public records is one thing,
Mhm.
right? But just being able to peruse to a goal, maybe you don't want something to happen or that kind of thing. When can you filter through? When can you go search? What are my privacy rights? That's, what's my expectation of privacy when I send an email out?
Mhm.
So it's not like I want Yahoo to be my go-to board email, but I'm stuck in a conundrum.
Yeah.
So
And how
So-
could that be resolved ultimately? I mean, if that's something that you still feel like you need some kind of response to, maybe work together with the board president and see if there's a way to get a response. If there's policy, in place, that would be a question I would ask. Is there something you can point me to that helps me understand?
right, a policy, yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I would expect. Here's our policy, or hey, great point. We don't really have a strong policy
Yeah.
that talks about when we could. Well, basically explain to me, and also it's kind of a records request, which is another area where I feel there's no trust because we fail, because I get a response if they feel like it. That's my personal belief. I can go back to January from when I first got here, and it's ad hoc, and a lot of times it's just frustrating responses.
Mhm.
But some of my very base questions from as soon as I found out about this or other issues, even just simple expense requests going back from my very first days as a board member, never answered. So I said, hey, tell me how you ended up in an employee's email to to say that this survey should not be revealed. How does that happen?
Mm.
And there's whether it's I'm asking as a board member or member of the public, whatever, in this case a board member, um, that's just a matter of decent respect to explain to me how you ended. Okay, so you found this, and this is the story for why this happened. But show me some nuts and bolts. I'm not always going to trust the first thing I hear. If just like everybody else, if my meter goes over here and I say that doesn't sound right to me, or I want to know more,
Mhm.
that's just been unusual for me this time around. Typically, I'd be invited in, there'd be a sit down, there'd be explanations. It's just different. It's really, really different.
Okay,
And
that's
that's
good.
from Jump Street. That's
Sure.
from the
Yeah,
day.
that's good for you to share so your other board members can hear that. Other,
I do have, like with communication, so I have a hearing disability. And even at this meeting, um, when there's long paragraphs, fast talking, I'm not going to follow it. I just can't. I also was told recently, though, that the loop system that I've been asking for 5 years, that we had a vendor offer to put it in at no charge months ago. Still don't have that. So the trust is just not there. The
Mhm.
communication, I don't believe they want that. The majority, some people, the administration, whoever. And, and then there's the thing of seconding motions. I think all motions should be seconded so that they could be discussed. You don't have to vote for it, but I was at the last meeting when I was out of the room, taking a call regarding a loved one who's in the hospital. There was a motion made and no second made. That kind of stuff is petty.
That's
There's
because
no reason not to second a motion because you can discuss it, and there's no part of a regular meeting where you can't have a motion. There's no part. There's no area in there where you can't have a motion.
well, again, I think coming back to what are some of the concerns, you're starting to lay some concerns out there, determining, by the leadership of the board, how you're going to be able to address those concerns and figure out a way to resolve them so you can all move forward as a team and regain trust and respect and communicate. But it's good. I mean, it's good that you're sharing them because some people will get frustrated and just not even share them anymore. So you want to try to make things better. So continue to, there may be a reason. I don't know all the details behind all of these things, I'm sure, but having that discussion and making sure that you're getting answers and responses and being able to communicate clearly, even though sometimes you may not get the answer you want. That happens as well. All right. So, yeah, these are just, the last thing would be just things to remember at a high level that you're an ongoing entity as one board. It's important to keep the big picture in mind, and that ultimately refers back to your mission. You have academics, intention, and mindset. Every student, every lesson, every day, right in front of you during your board member or board meetings. Keeping that in mind as you make your decisions, acting in the best interest of the district as a whole. You don't represent certain segments of the district, you represent the entire district. do what you can to develop good working relationships. If you feel like you have some relationships that aren't that great, then kind of try to level set, see what you can do to make those improvement. And just be sure to ask good questions. That was great advice that was given to me as a new board member. Ask a lot of questions, refer to policy, and don't make assumptions as you move forward with your decisions. Other comments, questions for me? Just think about, what commitments can we make? And we've been kind of talking about this. What can we make as a board? What commitments can we make to improve how we work together as an effective team? And think about that. And, from there, go into maybe a board assessment, develop board goals that align with the standards and with your vision and mission and priorities for the district, and hold one another accountable. And I'm happy to help. If I can answer, I will do my best from my own personal experience, plus the experience I have with OSBA in terms of best practices, and just trying to help. We're just trying to help people move forward in a way that is going to help unify them. We're facing some, inordinate changes that are coming along when it comes to funding, that's going to add stress to the stress that's already there. And we'll be finding out more about that within the next few weeks. But it's a difficult time that we're entering, and it's best to try to do what you can to settle the other tensions that could be resolved, and so that you can move forward in a united way.
I will say, if we spent more time on policy, I think we would build trust, and I think you all would be extremely pleasantly surprised at some of the things that are brought forward. I think we tend to just take the cookie cutter and not think about how we could really form this district. I think about, we had the one policy that we were reviewing together, and that had to do with interpersonal relationships within the district that were harmful. And the first three policy options thrown out were very simplistic, and the staff contradicted our leadership. Okay, and our leadership, I would say, had a naive view, because the staff has been here so long. So they're like, well, you don't understand who this will affect. Oh, it's not going to affect many people currently in our employee. And then the staff like, oh yeah, this, here's all the people that this affects.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thinking was, hey, and I think it was Bowling Green State University has a very comprehensive policy that really digs in nuts and bolts, but it's not a 5-minute thing. It's not a 5-minute decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, oh, we can solve it tonight. And what I felt and what I saw was, oh, well, if it's not going to be, if we can't do it just like that, forget it. It's not worth the effort. From my perspective, if we had done the homework, that would be just one example of comprehensive policies. We've agreed here that we know there are dangerous places in our schools. Maybe it's the restrooms.
Mm-hmm.
We've agreed on, and we've kind of agreed on that, but yet not real comprehensive policy for monitoring or other things that I think if we really focused on policy and policy governance, we would be surprised if we worked together of how we could quickly address drugs, vaping, bullying, safety in the restrooms, a lot of things that we talk about, but we really haven't dug down to where the rubber meets the road. And when we look at this and we talk about accountability of the leadership, if everything's just being fed down to me from the leadership and we're just voting on it, I don't feel like I'm creating accountability. I'm not creating task, condition, and standards, because we have specific understandings of some of the dangers and some of the things that could be done better. And so I think if we really took more time on policy, I think that is where we could see, so much improvement, better safety, all kinds of good things would come of that.
Thank you for that. Okay.
I'd like to thank you for coming out.
Well, thank you. I hope this has been helpful. I know we
Thank
spent
you.
a lot on, some of the soft skills, and you're in a tough spot, as Board of Education members, but thank you for your service. It takes a lot to put yourself out there and be willing to serve in this capacity, a lot of time away from family. And I'm confident that the skills that you have on this board is going to help move the district forward. So do what you can to improve and just keep one step at a time. And you'll get there.
Thank you so
All
much.
right,
You
thank you.
left us with a lot to think about. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
I appreciate everybody's time here tonight. And this was great. Thank you. Thank you for allowing this.
All right. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. So let me pull up. All right. Let me pull up the agenda real quick.
Mr. President, just so we're all on the same page, I don't have access to board docs, so you will not see an immediate change in board docs where we separated and removed those attachments, made C2 the second item. I don't have access to make that change, but just wanted to remind everyone here that's where we are now on the agenda. So hopefully you wrote it down, but that is where we're going next. Thank you.
So we're on item C2, second read of IGBLA, and a recommendation for approval of board policy.
So moved.
I have Ms. Graves
Second.
first. And Ms. Walsh, your second.
Sure, yeah.
You seconded?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Mrs. Walsh is second.
Got it.
All right.
Thank you.
On to discussion.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so the discussion, the policy does not read the same as the most recent policy they sent us. It's different. There were some changes made by the OSBA in their issue 2/1 June policy development, and it said the policy
Ms. Walsh, can you back up just really quick? You stated that the policy does not read the same as the most policy sent to us. And the update was on what date?
the date, the 2025 issue 2.1 June policy development quarterly. So that has a notation that they did change that to better reflect, had been revised to mirror the exceptions in 33.3. Nope, I'm sorry, 3313.473F. Did I say that too fast?
Are you
Yeah.
are you reading off
More
Ohio
closely.
Revised Code, please? The 3313.47.
3313.473F.
Is that ORC? Is that Ohio
I
Revised Code?
assume it is ORC, Mr. Kirshner.
It does appear. I just typed
District
it in.
should adopt, it says districts should adopt the revised policy sample. So that, the one we have in front of us in our packet is similar, but there are some differences, and I would think that we should. So the third paragraph, they have that read out, taken out. The one that starts, this policy does not prohibit or limit that the careers in academic mentoring and counseling between teachers, students, and regular courses of the school day is deleted from the revised copy. And then,
I'm sorry. Could you please? You lost me. Could you please give me a reference of where we're looking at?
the
when you-
policy that we're looking at that's in our board packet, IGBLA,
Yes.
the third paragraph
Third. Thank you. 2, 3.
is deleted out of the revised. And then after the number 5, they add, nothing in this policy requires disclosures or activity in violation of any court order, including any of the following. And that is now renumbered. Number 6 is numbered 1, number 7, 2, and number 8.3. And 4 and 5 are removed.
I was trying to locate that.
And you can see this. This is on board docs if you look at that issue.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It-
I only have one screen, so
it-
I'm trying to
it-
keep up with what you're saying. My apologies.
And I think I can download this and send you all PDF.
Well, I have it. I just don't have the screen up, so I didn't set up a second screen
And
tonight.
then you
I'm
could
sorry.
just open up the PDF from the mail.
Okay.
If I could share my screen, I would, but I'm not sure I can do that with.
I will
might
be right back.
able to.
Thank you.
Anyhow, then they add a paragraph. John's like, yes, send me this now. No, they add a paragraph after the remove number 5. Nothing in this policy requires disclosure or activities in violation of specific requests for non-disclosures made pursuant to a criminal investigation or grand jury subpoena in which the student is the victim and a parent is the alleged perpetrator. Next paragraph. Nothing in this policy prohibits or prevents mandatory reporting under RC 2151.421. And the next paragraph, nothing in this policy prohibits or limits the careers, academic mentoring, and counseling between teachers and students in the regular course of the school day. Everything else is the same. And I am going to attempt to send all of you that policy right now.
So are you recommending we table this one as well?
Oh, we can't. We have to. We're going to be doing a second. We're going to be doing another meeting for the other one. So I guess maybe, or just with the changes they recommend. I mean, it doesn't make a difference, does it? Really, in all honesty.
I mean, we could always reconvene on or before July
I'm going to
1st.
send it to you, Latoya.
Miss, my
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, and I'm typing right now, so I'll get right there with you in just 1 second, okay?
okay, yeah, no, I pulled it up. I was just gonna state that if we do need to, we can still can reconvene on or before Tuesday, July 1st, if need be, and do both at that time, especially if there are different things that we need to discuss further tonight that we're not ready for, and then make any additional updates, and if we also need to consult with legal counsel or anything like that. So we still have till July 1st, on or before.
Just by looking, just my opinion, that those 2 changes, I don't have a problem with. If we wanted to vote on the current revised.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Adopt the changes.
Yeah.
The only thing that I will add is when we did our OSBA training recently downtown, I went to a class specifically about the other policy. I'm sorry, I'm getting off. Let me table what I started to say. I'm thinking of the cell phone use policy.
Okay, yeah, we're still on
Ignore me.
IGBL.
Ignore
Yep.
me. Sorry. Sorry.
No
Off
worries.
track.
And Miss Walsh, I did get the email too. Thank you. And I concur
Yeah,
with Libby. I did try to do a side by side. So for me, as far as discussion, if we do need to adopt or choose to this evening, I'm okay with adopting the current changes unless someone has a motion to table, if that's what we feel need to do as a group. Again, I'm only asking if we do that we reconvene on or before July 1st to ensure we're on the date and not doing it as a, what do they call it? Like a
Like retroactive?
retroactive. I would prefer not to do retroactive if we
All
can,
right.
especially knowing we have the time to do that. So I would just yield to my colleagues. But I do concur with you, Ms. Gray. I'm okay with adopting the current changes, but if we do not, and we want to table just to have more time and not, or anyone feels rushed or anything like that, as long as we can reconvene, on or before Tuesday, July 1st, that would be great.
So, do we have a date yet for that meeting?
No, I was just about to ask if that is, we're gonna have to schedule another meeting before July 1st. If we could nail down a date tonight, so I'm not trying to chase dates via email, that would be greatly appreciated. So,
But
oh, go ahead.
I was going to also ask, can you go back to that policy again, Ms. Libby? I think it was was it BG? For policies, is there anything that talks about the policy we could adopt the first meeting that are presented to address emergency conditions or special events or anything like that? The one that governs us for implementation. I just don't have my second screen up.
Development and adoption
Yes, ma'am.
policies introduced and recommended to the board should not be adopted in closed meeting and permit further study and provide opportunity for interested parties to react. However, the board may adopt policies
Okay.
at the first meeting. They are presented to address emergency conditions and events.
Okay.
Unless otherwise specified, a new policy or policy amendment is effective at the date of the adoption by the board and supersedes all previous policies. Unless otherwise specified, the policy is effective.
And the USDA says that, we can waive multiple readings in order to adopt before
Yeah,
July
we have-
1st.
Yeah, I was just making
Yeah.
sure it was in our
And that's
policy.
what this says in their update in issue June 2.1. So
Yeah,
we could do that.
I was just making sure we were okay within that. It was read. Like that's all I was asking. Thanks.
so I don't want to create any perception. I don't think we have anything exceptional or emergency here, but at the same time, it's unfortunate for this one policy to create another more board meeting altogether if we don't have specific changes.
We're gonna have to for the cell phone, anyways. So
Okay.
we might as well.
Right. Okay.
If everyone's in agreement, we just table. We hold a meeting for both policies.
I would recommend that we postpone it so then we have a day, because if you table it, it doesn't necessarily have to be taken off the table.
Apologies. Yep. I agree with you. Wrong verbiage on my behalf. But I agree with you that we would
But
postpone.
are we
So Ms. Walsh is making the motion to postpone the.
No, I'm not at this time making any motion.
Oh, I thought
We don't have a date yet, so there's no way to make a motion.
right?
So
but
But
so
if we could come up with a date real quick.
Yep. so all right. So let's
then
come up
I
with a
will
date.
be-
All
I'll
right.
be glad to.
So everyone get their calendars out.
Correct me if I'm wrong while you think about your calendars. We need to accept whatever changes to include the whatever might have been left out of this and still have our first reading today, correct?
I think we've had a first read, and I don't
Yeah.
think we need to approve any changes until we actually go ahead and vote on it. And I'm just putting out dates. If you want to do another Monday, I can do the 23rd. That's fine.
I can do the 23rd.
Let me see.
And it would be a pretty quick meeting, right? I mean, we do have quite a few of the other policies, but
Well, the other ones we can do in July.
yeah, just
So it'd just be
like
these two.
15, I think, or something like that. Or
Yeah.
20. I don't know.
I
didn't
don't
count.
remember
I'm
how many.
just guessing.
Oh, you're saying the 23rd, a week from today. Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
I have an
So-
OSBA meeting that day, but what time are we thinking? Like 7 or 6:30? And I mean, I just want to. If we're coming in and going out, are we gonna have to,
We're saying the second.
what is the? Is it just to go over the policies on the 23rd? Is that what we're asking for the date for?
23rd would be for these two policies.
Just to vote on
IGBLA.
those two.
So we'll have discussion.
Yeah. Yes, we would have discussion.
But it'll just be for these two policies? Or will it be all the policies?
Oh, right.
I was thinking it was just going to be these two.
Oh,
I
that, yeah,
before
that's
July
going to be
1st.
like what, a 5-minute meeting? That'd be
No.
about 10.
Because I have concerns on the cell phone policy.
So can we do it? I can do a 7 o'clock then on the 23rd.
7 o'clock on the 23rd work with everyone?
I'm good with that, yes.
Sounds good. Thank you.
John?
I think so. I'm not looking at my work calendar right now. Sorry. I will say yes. Um, and also, I'm still confused. Could you clarify, Libby? Did you say that we've already had a first read on?
Yeah, we had a first read last time.
Okay, all right. And then what about JFCK? Has that had a first read?
This is
First
our
read. Okay.
That's tonight.
That's the
That's
one
today.
we added as C3 to the agenda to count as the first read for that policy.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so to recap, we're looking at Monday. Let me write this down real quick.
So I move that we postpone, item 2, what is it, I'm sorry,
C2.
C2, adoption of, policy IGBLA until June 23rd, 2025. Board of Education special meeting,
I will
At 7
second
p.m.
that.
7 p.m.
And I will second.
Okay. So, if we're making changes, do we need to read those changes as a first read tonight? Because our first read would not have included the changes that we're looking for. And I don't have any idea how
With,
that works.
okay, my motion will be amended to, with the changes recommended by the OSBA and that I read during this meeting and forwarded to all board members.
Okay. So, you are actually possibly moving that, the changes made be presented as our first read tonight, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Does that make sense? Otherwise, we'd be showing up to vote on something that we really didn't have a first read on, or am I wrong? I don't know. I'm asking.
It's the same policy.
It's the
just
same.
Revision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Same policy,
it's-
just revision.
same
Okay.
Revised. Yeah.
Excellent. However it works. I just didn't want, I wanted to make sure we weren't.
Well,
setting
but any
ourselves
of the stuff that we first read, we can have changes made. So it's just for us to read and then the public can look at them and then we can come back the second time and say, hey, we heard that this might not be good and that, and then we discuss it and debate it and make a decision, right?
Excellent. Thank you.
Do you mind?
I have questions before we go
yeah.
to roll call, just for discussion purposes. Was wondering with that, or do we want to make sure we have any of our suggestions and those changes so we all can read them in advance and discuss, or we want to just come with our own revisions the day of to discuss? Because I think that always becomes an area of concern. So I just want to make sure we're clear on getting changes so we can look at the multiple revisions from the board so we can be prepared before we come and ask questions. Are we saying we're just going to make the revisions that day?
I don't think because it's policy, I don't think we can share them outside of here with more than one other person.
Right. So if we got all of if each person would reach out to our treasurer and superintendent to make suggested revisions for whatever area, that way when it's posted on board docs, we can see those items to review prior to the meeting to be prepared.
Right. That's
So,
great.
so how
Yeah.
does that work? That we make this recommendations to the superintendent? What if he doesn't agree with them?
No, I'm saying to put the revisions in the policy. Not, well, I'm not asking them to agree. It's just whatever the board is asking for. They're the ones that put the policy and update the policies, the superintendent and the treasurer. That's how it always has been and they work, either they work with Neola or OSBA to make those revisions that we've had and then shared them with us on board docs. So are you saying you want to just send them to be added to the agenda?
So you're saying the superintendent would share them on board docs, our recommendation?
I'm saying that if there's a specific area of the policy that you have language that you would like to have changed, the person has been updating our policies is someone in administration, whether it's the superintendent or the treasurer. My question is, are we just going to come with all of those just to discuss that day? Or are we going to be able to get those in advance so we can prepare for the discussion? That was my question.
Well, I'm still so confused. I apologize because I'm just not following because my thoughts were that if we have something we want to change, that we bring it forth to the board and discuss it with the board.
Yeah, that would help with the discussion to the board. It's not for them to agree or disagree. It's just so I can have it in advance so I can review it and have have time. But you're just saying you would just bring it to the board that day, and then we would then have to make those discussions, make that decision on Monday. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I guess to me, that's what a first read does, is gives you the opportunity to make your points. These are the things that I feel like need to be addressed. And then it gives us the second read to be able to have done our research on those suggestions, then be able to vote on it.
So what did that policy, what policy did you say address?
Have issues with?
The one about, the policies, you know, you read it on there.
With the first and second read.
Oh, the first
That
and
was-
second read one?
Yeah, which one was
Well,
Where I was asking you.
that's policy BG.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry, BF. Sorry.
What are you asking me?
I want to read it
Are
real quick. just
Are
to
there
make
any
sure.
things with this policy that stand out right this moment that you maybe have concerns about or think maybe something stands out where you think, hey, I'd like to see some other options on the one that we're just looking at right now, the IGBLA? Is there a section where anybody's seeing something that right now that they've already seen where they think it could be worded better or we're missing something?
I was fine with voting on it tonight. So.
No, I just
Have
wanted
any
to make sure if we did have
discussion?
anything, we were prepared. That's all I was asking. So I didn't mean
Yeah.
to cause any confusion. I just wanted to make sure that if we did, like after you said on it again, if there was something else, we would get that timely versus the night of. That's all.
Yeah, and I'm just lost on how you do that without creating some kind of unintentional round robin. So I think maybe it,
Right, and it wouldn't be. That's why I would go to one person, and then it would all be put into one document, and then we would all see it at the same time on board doc. So it wouldn't be a round robin where we would be.
right. No, but what my point would be, and again, I'm just offering my perspective, not any kind of legal opinion, but I know the superintendent can certainly reach out to all of us for dates and times and administrative things. But I think if we individually communicate to any one entity desired changes and then that goes back out to the rest of us, I think regardless of what touch point we've used for that, we might be on kind of thin ice. That's all.
That's the first time I heard that.
All right, so Mrs. Walsh emailed us the revised changes to IGBLA. We've got a date, Monday, July 23rd, 2025, 7 p.m.
Did you get a second on that?
Yes.
I seconded it.
We
Okay.
both did, yeah.
Mrs. Gaudelberger.
Yep. I have Miss Walsh with the motion, Mr. Bauer as the second.
Yep.
And
Do you mind just rereading? Sorry. I'm sorry.
yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Next time somebody else is treasurer pro tem, I'll just let y'all know. So get ready. I have the motion is move to postpone C2, the adoption of board policy IGBLA until June 23rd, 2025 at 7 p.m. A special meeting with the changes that were read from OSBA's June policy review email that was also forwarded to all board members. Is that correct? Okay.
On to roll call, please.
Mr. Kirshner,
Aye.
Mr. Bauer,
Aye.
Miss Gray,
Aye.
Miss Walsh,
Aye.
Miss Dowdleberger, aye.
All right, motion passes. On to item C3.
And this is just discussion only, correct?
This is the first read of JFCK.
Richard, still make a motion.
Um, we already,
No, because we're not voting on it.
we already approved the modified changes.
Discussing.
Yep. So, any discussion on item C3?
We already discussed.
Yes,
Oh, C3,
Yeah.
C3, yes.
I
Yes.
do not.
All right. So I think Mrs. Walsh, you said first. We can just
Okay.
go down the row.
So this number one, this is for the use of electronic communication equipment by students. And number one, limit student use of cell phones during the school day as much as possible. That's too arbitrary. Honestly, I don't think we should be allowing our students, unless they have a medical reason or maybe they have an IEP that they have they're a hearing disability and they need it to help with that. We shouldn't allow cell phones in the schools. I've talked to teachers. Multiple teachers have said we need to get them out of the school. I talked to my daughter about because I'm like, she's very protective. She wants her kids to walk to school. She wants to be able to monitor them. And I said, well, don't. I thought she wanted cell phones. She goes, no, they can have a watch. They can have another. They don't need a cell phone in school. No, because she's a teacher, right? And she knows how detrimental they are. She's a high school educator, and her husband's a elementary educator. Don't need them in school. So number one, I don't like that. Plus, and if you're going to say that, you need to have some. What does that mean? As much as possible.
Right. And I would echo that. What I started to say earlier was we took, I went to specific training at the OSBA's meeting about this where multiple school districts showed their current policy. Dayton schools was the most strict. They suggested that, but most of the districts had not done that. And Dayton literally was taking the phones away as you came in the building, and they had pouches or something for them. But as much as possible is very vague. I think we know that the phones are being used to a lot of time instigate bullying, take inappropriate pictures, and kind of doing the viral fight things. There's a lot of downsides. Obviously, that's what this is recognizing. But as much as possible is just very vague. Also, under item 3, this no, I'm sorry, under the paragraph following item 3, it says that electronic communication devices may people who abuse this basically may have their phone or devices confiscated. And I think there should be a scale or something that actually says may just means if I feel like taking it from you, I will. And if I don't feel like taking it from you, I won't. May is just way too arbitrary. I think there should be maybe a first offense, second offense, and what it means. If it's taken away, how will it be returned? Will it be returned in 30 days, 60 days, only to a parent with something? I think we need to drill down on this one, and also the IEP. I think that's another area where the system can be abused. Obviously, there are specific needs, where an IEP may require the use of electronics communications, but where is there an IEP where the student needs a cell phone? For medical monitoring, that's certainly one thing. But I have fielded specific complaints about kids who have IEPs getting away with beating up other kids because they have an IEP, and so they have temper issues. So I don't want to see us create exceptions for IEPs where they're abusing the process just because there's an IEP. We want to protect the students and look out for their best interests. But I would say this is a little vague and just leaves leaves too many holes based on hopefully what we're trying to accomplish. So, for instance, the phones are only used between classes, aren't used between classes. I'd like to see more specifics. I would certainly want to see that no cell phones will be active or used in private areas, something along those lines as well.
This is Grace. Sorry.
Okay. So, Ohio has their model policy.
Could you say that again, please?
Ohio has the model policy.
Yeah.
And I just forwarded a copy to everybody. And it's basically is students are prohibited from using cell phones at all times. Then it gives the exception of the nothing in this policy prohibits a student from using a cell phone for the purpose of documented in the student's individual education program developed, and then also a student may use a cell phone to monitor or address health concerns. I just sent it.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
not.
it didn't go?
It's
No.
not. The attachment's
I'm
not on
sorry. Let me get that here.
Yeah.
And
And so
so
I guess we don't know why this wouldn't be.
She's
Oh,
trying
Kirshner.
to, she's trying to finish, Mr. Kirshner.
I'm sorry.
She's gonna resend with the attachment.
And she wasn't
Yeah.
finished speaking. And Olivia, I may need you to repeat as well once you're done with that, please, so I can have your I know you had the Ohio model policy, you forwarded a copy, students are prohibited, and then it mentioned something about the IEP, if I'm not mistaken. I want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There, I just sent it back to everybody here. This tells what the exceptions are, and that they may use it for their health concerns, to address health concerns, or if they have an IEP. And it also gives out the suggested disciplines, and you select which disciplines, or if all of them. But I feel like this policy that was presented to us is so vague that, and I've had, which I've talked to the board multiple times about, that I've met with the elementary students. I know the elementary is just one set of students, but they have all said over and over and over and over again that the cell phones need to get out of the classroom.
Yeah, and I will echo that on pretty much every grade level. I have been surprised even the students say, even the high school students say, hey, that would stink, but we need to do it. In general, they're saying, yep, we don't like it. We're not going to like it, but I think they agree it needs to happen. So is there, I'm confused, and I don't know if anybody here would have any answer to this. Why would this model policy that we're looking at, the JFCK, vary so much from the state model policy?
I don't have an answer to that.
We can always reach out to our OSBA, which is our policy provider. But if I recall, with even Neola, there were sometimes very vague policies, which allowed us as the board to come up with adding any additional things we wish. So this is just like the main things, and then of course there's things that we can implement. So
Yeah, okay.
I think it's a shell at how I took this one for me, but we can always reach out to OSBA. That is our policy provider to find out their why.
So it's our understanding this was presented to us as it sits from the OSBA.
I don't know if it's specifically from OSBA or other members of OSBA that created a shell to send out, but that is our policy provider.
Yeah, I got that.
I don't know who
Yeah.
who in OSBA, if it was a combination of association members as well as the organization as a whole.
The only other thing I see that I would like to see is when there's an exception for IEPs or medical, that we reserve the right to provide equipment that would provide that. In other words, if we have an IEP or if you have a medical condition and it says, um, you know, you're monitoring your blood sugar by XYZ, and we have a method that would perhaps do that, that would not put a cell phone in your hand. that
So
we
No,
would-
I
can I
disagree
make sure?
with that.
Can I make sure I understand so I capture this? So you're saying that when you would like to see an exception, John, for someone that has a medical or an IEP, that we, the school district, reserves the right to provide similar equipment to support that medical or IEP need. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I would disagree with that because you're invading someone's privacy. Because we would own that cell phone, but yet their medical records are on that phone. And I don't, I would think that that would violate HIPAA, not for sure, but I would think that it would. Um, and I don't think as a parent, I would want other people to know my child's health issues.
And
Well,
maybe
I'm not
hold on.
saying that we would own it. I'm saying we could possibly provide you with a tool that isn't a cell phone, you know, or especially in the case of an IEP, that we could provide an electronic device such as our Chromebook, et cetera. Just maintaining
Can I?
some rights that might provide you everything you need without necessarily putting you in places that we don't want you to be, whether it's World Wide Web or Facebook, etc.
Well,
So,
maybe,
if I could-
maybe
real
it'll go-
quick. Can we go? Let's just go one at a time. I heard Mrs. Dalderberger was next, and then
You have to make the phone.
I will. Mrs. Walsh can go after that.
I was just going to state in regards to the medical equipment and IEP piece that even if there was some sort of contract or exception, even with HIPAA, they can do a HIPAA release form if we own the equipment or tool, or there was an understanding. And then if not, you know, we have with our Chromebooks, there's there in final forms as a parent. We agree, you know, that we're responsible for said Chromebook, especially if the child is bringing it home, etc. So same thing with that device. So if they opt out and that child's device is somehow utilized to, you know, instigate further bullying or viral fighting, as was mentioned this evening, then there could be some liability there. So there could be some ways to maybe add in both. I don't know, but just wanted to throw that out as a suggestion. Not saying I agree either way.
All right, Mrs. Walsh.
So, I have two things here. So as far as with the IEP, it can be wrote in the IEP how the device is used and consequences for misuse. And we should require that all IEPs state exactly what the consequences for misuse are. And it should be very clearly written. This policy is nice, but I don't agree with some of it because it says the students are prohibited from using cell phones. I don't believe the students should be allowed to bring a cell phone to school, period. They shouldn't be able to have a cell phone at school. There's other alternatives that if parents are wanting to track their child, if that's what they want. But children, they shouldn't be calling their kids. They can call the office if it's an emergency, just like they did when we went to school. There are options for getting a hold of your child in case of an emergency. And if the cell phone is locked in their locker, which we don't have lockers, so that's not going to happen. They're not going to hear it anyhow, since that's one of the suggestions. And then the other thing this policy is saying, the teachers are going to have to monitor it. And I don't like that. Our teachers don't have time, and they're not cell phone monitors. They're teachers. So the cell phone should not be allowed at the school, and there should be uh, the parent should have to come to the school and pick up the cell phone if the child is caught with the cell phone. So they're also being held accountable for the cell phone that they're paying for their child.
Right.
It's the parent's cell phone, it's not the child's.
So to clarify, I'm sorry. Are you done? Is it? No. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm
Mrs.
done.
Krishner,
Yeah,
and
I'm
then
done.
I'll say a
Sorry.
couple
I
things.
was rambling. There you go.
I'm lost.
All right, I'll just say my things. I do I'm reading through the Ohio cell phone policy. This definitely looks a lot less vague. I do disagree, though, that cell phones should be prohibited from coming to school. I think that there's times before and after school too where a child might need it, whether it be at a bus stop, walking home from school. I wouldn't want to hinder upon that, but I do believe that this, and just looking at this, I'd like a little bit more time to look at it. But this cell phone policy, I think I would be on board with the one that you shared with us, Mrs. Gray.
Yeah, and I agree that I would not, because of extracurricular activities, things like that that go on. I think that they should be able to have a cell phone. The offices closed at after practices and things like that for them to be able to call their parents to. It's not like back in the day when we had the payphones. That's what I was given a quarter every day to call my parents, tell them when we were done. It's not like that now. So I think that they should be able to take them, but they just cannot have them out during the school day whatsoever. And then I think when we go through and we look at the different disciplines, you know, it would be nice that if we force the parents at some point that you know, after the first offense, second offense, whatever it is, that they have to take the consequences of allowing their children to have their cell phones out.
I would like to concur with that. Another concern I have just with even the possibility, and I pray we never have this, any type of like active shooter even in the area. Granted, you know, we have our metal detectors, we've got our SRO, we've got some great, you know, our security staff, our police officers are great in our buildings, but there could be things around the building that in case of an you know, emergency, we've had lockdowns not because of the school, we've had lockdowns because of things in the community. And if it's ever one of those situations to where it could get worse and there's not a way for students to reach their parents, I would hate for that. And I would, for me, that would be my concern, and maybe there'd be other concerns from other parents regarding that as well.
Mr. Kirschner had comments.
Yeah, if you look, if we look at Dayton's policy, there,
Did you send that to us, Mr. Kirshner?
um,
Or can you?
yeah, not at the second, but I can eventually. But their policy is to collect at the beginning of the day and return at the end of the day. And then if you have medical or IEP needs, you may be granted access. So to me, that would be possibly that. And I guess by saying it that way, it leaves it pretty open. Access could be okay because of your situation, we're going to let you carry your phone, or access could be okay if you need access to your phone to check XYZ, you can request it. So I think they've left it a little open, but it also gives them flexibility to give the student access as the district or nurses, etc., or educators uh, see fit. So, for instance, if you have an IEP and it only affects you in, it doesn't affect you in gym or music, etc., etc., then you could say, okay, yes, you can have access, or we'll make it available for this class, etc. So it gives a lot of flexibility to how that's enforced and what we do. So we're not creating so many exceptions. And I agree with what Latoya said as far as security, but I do also believe that there are other things we can put in place to ensure that every classroom has the ability to call out, et cetera, and which could actually be more streamlined and possibly useful for security than everybody having one. So at all times, I should say. But you did great input as far as after school, etc. Yeah.
Any other discussion?
Well, I think I would agree that if they checked in their phones, that would, I think, be acceptable. I just don't want to
I
see our
don't know how
teachers.
that gets implemented. I'd be interested to see how that happens. happens because like, if, say for example, middle school and high school, you don't start the day out at the same room that you end your day at. And how are they secured? I guess is the other thing.
I do have a question with that. Should we, are these questions that we want to get back to the superintendent?
I would think that we would need some of these answered by the superintendent.
So then what I have for questions are, just so I can have in the notes, is this for me, okay for me to recap, Mr. President?
Yes, please.
So what I've heard is check-in and check-out processes, if there was something of that nature, specifically for middle school and high school with their days not ending the same. Any additional policy updates for students with medical, whether it's an IEP or 504, because there may need to be adding to that policy as well, correct? And then let me go back to, so those are the main two that I had. And then discipline, and then would we want to add anything in the like final forms as well? Like a parent agreement, student agreement, like we do for Chromebooks.
Yeah. In the student, has to be in the student handbook, I believe.
But they could, I'm saying they could, everybody they could sign off on it in final forms too, or and add it to the handbook, correct? Student handbook. Okay. All right. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else I need to add?
I'll clarify that the Dayton Public Schools, it's a part of their student code of conduct, and the code is exactly the same, I believe, JFCK, so they use the same, so you can find that easily.
Just to clarify real quick, so JFCK is the same one that Dayton's using?
Yeah, they include theirs in their code of student conduct, but they use the same policy number, JFCK.
Yeah.
Modified the same?
Say that again, please.
Is it modified the same? The parent is the policy the same that we have here, or do they have
No,
modifications?
they were one of the early adopters to a very strict policy, so they take theirs in with.
And you're going to send that to everyone, like Miss Gray sent the other one for us, and Miss Walsh. If you could, that'd be great. Thank you.
I didn't hear what you said. I was trying to read this.
Oh no, I was just
policy.
asking Mr. Kirshner to send what he was speaking of, kind of how I was saying, like you sent the one to us, and then Miss Gray sent the Ohio model policy. I was just asking him to send it. They must use OSBA as well as their policy provider, because we would all have the same numbers. Depends on your policy provider. Neola has their numbering configuration, and OSBA has theirs. So the numbers are going to be the same, or the letters rather. It's just the content will be different.
Yes. I'm sending that to Seth, and he can distribute. But to follow up with Libby's question, they started off with, I think, very expensive pouches for the phones, and then I don't know if they were ending up getting lost or what, and then they defaulted to basically, as I understand it, just an envelope that they are recording the data on, and then they're storing them when you come in and distributing them back when you go to get on the bus.
So, Mr. President, I will get you the questions for you to fill to our superintendent on those 3 areas identified, and then we have the other policies, I guess, to then bring back for a second review. Is that correct?
Yep.
Thank you.
And so that'll be on next Monday. All right, on to anything else for item C3? On to item D1. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have 1 second.
Mr. Aldoberger is first, and I have Miss Kathy Walsh as second.
Yep.
Roger that, sir.
All right, on to roll call, please.
Mr. Kirschner,
I'm sorry, I was having trouble hearing. We are now moving to dismiss. Is that correct?
Correct.
Jen?
Correct.
Thank you. Aye.
Mr. Bauer,
Aye.
Miss Gray,
Aye.
Miss Walsh,
Aye.
Mr. Aldoberger. Aye.
It is 9:30 p.m. and we are adjourned.
We are German. According to